What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm your host, Jeremy Versillo, and joining me tonight, my pal and yours, Shams Benamor. Shams, how are you doing on this fine Tuesday evening?
Well, I'll just say in progress, because I'm just basically watching every second of the Red Wings game, just hoping for the best. So if you see my demeanor change, you'll know how to game it.
Well, it's so far a good game for you. You've got your leading scorer and captain back in Dylan Larkin. He is the captain there, right? That would be embarrassing if I'm wrong.
Oh, yeah. They were no captain for a while, that they finally gave it to the one person that they could give it to.
Glad I wasn't wrong there. If you're new here, Short Shifts is a twice-weekly check-in between the ginormous Sunday evening Keeping Karlsson episodes. It's designed to more keep you up to date with the news and some ever-changing landscape of the NHL, as opposed to a deeper dive. With that, Shams, why don't you bring us right into our first piece of news about Dylan Larkin?
Yes, I'm not sure if he's a certified Band-Aid boy, but he has come back from another injury, and not a moment too soon for him. He's already has a goal right now for the team, and he's centering a line with another red-hot player, Raymond and Perron, which leaves Comfort with Kane and DeBrincat, and then the bottom six of, I want to say random people, but somehow I think Fisher has a goal and assist today. So it's kind of that Seattle mess of you never know who's going to score, but you know who's the most important player is Larkin. And when he's on the ice, the teams are completely different. And we see that they're leading, at least right now, 3-1, which is something you wouldn't imagine looking at their 7 or 8 game losing streak they had while he was gone.
The team definitely struggled hard without Larkin in the lineup. I'm excited that he's back. I think it's good for all Red Wings, and they're clearly in the middle of a playoff hunt. One of the teams they're hunting against may be losing a key component, though. Tom Wilson of the Washington Capitals has an in-person hearing for high sticking. I would almost more call it a slash. It was that violent of a high stick. I don't know what he was thinking. He was frustrated near the end of a 7-3 blowout to Toronto, but an in-person hearing means they can give him more than 5 games. He's been suspended before, although has been in the league's good graces for a couple years now. I'm guessing this is a longer suspension, and he may not be useful to you for the rest of your fantasy playoffs, given that that's 7 or 8 games left in playoffs. If he misses at least 5 of them, you can cut bait. Any further words of wisdom there?
Yeah, if this was like the middle of the regular season, you could play that dance of, oh, is he important or not? But since we're into the playoffs now, you can't be playing games unless you're in a keeper league where you need to keep him. You're free to cut. Assuming he gets the suspension, yeah.
Honestly, Wilson hasn't even been that good this season. He's been valuable in leagues that count hits and penalty minutes. He's got 197 hits and 120 penalty minutes. But outside of that, he's on a much lower point pace than previous seasons. He's only got 9 power play points. I think he's often been cut by other teams, or by teams before this, and may even be on some wires. He was on a hot streak before this, though. Next up, we have some update on the Calgary goaltending situation. Take us away.
So Markstrom is back from his mysterious injury. I'm not sure what it was. He was set to play and then he just was out. But basically the word is he's back at practice and the plan is for him to come back Saturday. And this is going to be one of those things where, as a Markstrom owner, you probably know if you have him in fantasy is that you're going to have to wait until they actually skate on the ice to confirm, because even if he practices, it's not a confirmation. But this next one is actually an update that is new, is that Vladimir is having season-ending hip surgery. So he is now out for the remainder of the season. So that leaves Wolf, is my guess. It's that he haven't been set down. I'm not even sure who would be a backup per se. I know they have a back-to-back, so maybe they might do something different, but it looks like it's a two-headed race, and will be interesting to see how they play. I wouldn't be surprised if they alternate. I wouldn't be surprised if they play Markstrom. It's going to be one of those situations where we're going to have to wait and see. But at the very least, it's a 2-horse race and not a 3-1 that we've seen in other teams.
Hopefully for their sake, Markstrom will be ready for this back-to-back. If not, like you said, I actually don't know who their call-up from Abbotsford would be. Yeah, I have no clue. I can't find it currently. Last piece of news we've got, the Buffalo Sabres, who I think I've highlighted 3 times in the last 2 weeks as a strong playoff schedule team, decided to shuffle up their lines, which means some of the less desirable streamers may now be more desirable. Let me run you through what they've got. Their first line is Peterka with Thompson and Tuck. Second line, Greenway, Cozens, and Benson. And the third line, Skinner, Krebs, and Girgensons. The way I see this, it definitely hurts Girgensons' value. He was kind of a fringy streamer because he was on that top line. Suddenly, Peterka's back on the menu. He had kind of fallen off and been playing mostly third-line minutes. Greenway's still a good option. I'm not too worried about Skinner on that third line. Peyton Krebs is an option, I guess, although he's not on a power play. Let me run you through the power play units. Tuck, Peterka, Greenway, Thompson, Dahlin. So Greenway and Peterka getting power play 1. Benson, Cozens, Skinner, Byram, Power on power play 2. Any high-priority must-add streamers from that group for the teams on buys, Shams?
For me, it's Peterka, because I've been a fan of him even when he was kind of hovering on the second or third lines when they had it earlier in the season. And if he's going to be able to play with Thompson and Tuck, that alone in power play 1 is just a cherry on top for me. So right now, I have picked up in one league Greenway as my stash. That was at the start of the week. So right now, if I had the choice and I could see into the future, I probably would have taken Peterka first, but either of them are fine.
And real quick, shuffling back, I was looking up the Calgary Wranglers AHL roster. I think I said Abbotsford earlier because I think I'm stuck in the past. It looks like Oscar Dankst may be the next goalie in line. If you remember, he was one of the goalies that played for Vegas in the past when Vegas seems to always have goalie injuries. But definitely not adding him. Just grab Dustin Wolf. You're guaranteed 1 game, maybe even more if Markstrom's still hurt. Now for some injury-outjury news. Our old friend Viktor Arvidsson returned yesterday and had a pretty nice game. I think he had a goal, an assist, 5 shots, some power play time. I'm excited about Arvidsson. I don't have room to fit him in my lineup Saturday, but I'd be adding him if he's available to you. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. The fact that the part that surprised me is that I was surprised to see that he was getting power play 1, and that power play looked really nice last night. So that's the part that gets me. So it really depends on how many moves you got to play with, because the interesting thing is that they have one of the few off-night games of a Monday night game next week. So you might not be able to get value of him. So if you maybe have some leftover picks that you haven't used in your playoff or you're in a buy and you're just looking for any sort of value, you could be an interesting one to take a stab at, get the Monday game next week, and then just you won't have any others until I believe it's like Thursday, Saturday. So then you could maybe take the guess of, hey, maybe he's better than that random other winger that you have, and maybe you start him and then drop like a Bushnevich, say, or something like that. So that's going to be the interesting thing, is playing that game of chicken and seeing if you can maybe pick him up for that Monday game.
Definitely, I'd be interested in adding him for that Monday game and then cutting bait if you can't fit him Thursday, Saturday. I'll admit that's a nice tidbit you gave about the power play. I've been super busy at work this week, so haven't watched as many games as normal. So I was just purely going on the box score there when I said that he had a good game. I'm glad that you can corroborate that. Next piece of injury news, why don't you take whichever one you want off of this list, Shams?
So this is just kind of a basic, just kind of a reminder. I'm not sure if you want any involvement with the Sharks right now, but basically Chrona has been getting a lot of play because of Blackwood's injury. However, Blackwood has been activated out of the IR, and interestingly enough, it was Chrona getting sent down to the AHL. So it looks like, at least, unless they have high hopes in Cooley, which they've only played for 1 game, I feel like they're just going to be ramming Blackwood down the rest of the season and then giving Chrona the time to play in the AHL, and then Cooley's just a warm body when they need to save Blackwood late in the third period when it's 7-1.
Yeah, I wonder if, like you said, if they're just going to force feed Blackwood every game for the rest of the season. And actually, before he went down with injury, he was playing only every other start. But it looks like, I'm looking at his last set of starts, and he's got save percentages over 900 in, 6 out of 7, 7 out of 9. Like, he's facing a lot of shots. He's stopping a lot of pucks. It's not a bad option. You could do worse if you're, running one goalie and need a goalie for next week when the forward schedule kind of sucks. So keep an eye on Blackwood, especially if he has a good game tonight or whenever they play next. I think it's tonight. Next up, some injury updates out of Vegas. You have someone listed here missing his second game in a row due to illness, but you didn't say who it was. So you want to update me?
All right, so the good old copy-paste failed me. So it's actually Pietrangelo is out again. It was said as an illness, but we'll have to keep an eye because I believe you have these situations now. I think it was Markstrom missed 2 weeks. These other players have missed time. So hopefully it's not a long-term thing, but he has been out. This will be the second game, so it's going to be just kind of a thing to just keep an eye out for game day news and just see when the times actually comes for him back. And then also, as mentioned before, it's not a definite thing, but Hertl is now skating on his own, not with the team, so it's just that next kind of step to keep in line, and then maybe, let's just see, maybe I wouldn't see next week, so maybe say if you're in the championship or if you want someone to stash in your keeper league for next year, maybe that will be the week that something happens, but it is progressing.
Definitely progressing. I agree, probably not playoff relevant for Hertl. I forgot that Pietrangelo had missed a couple games. I do remember seeing that. Seems like more ice time opportunities for Hanifin and Martinez, although at least one of those guys is not doing much with those ice time opportunities. That's a teaser for later. One more minor injury, semi-injury thing that kind of just came to mind as I'm box score watching. I've been a bit weirded out by the fact that Jack Hughes has missed 2 practices this week. He's played in both games, but has not been practicing. I am guessing he's nursing an injury. I'm kind of side-eyeing the weekend back-to-back because of that. This is just me speculating, nothing from the team. So yeah, keep an eye on that if he continues to miss practices. Last but not least, we've got a Jonas Brodin lower body injury. Coach hopes it's not too serious. Beat writers were saying that the loss of him and Eriksson Ek were really showing defensively on the PK. I think I saw something, again, this is me having not been as involved this week. Did Eriksson Ek get a misconduct last game, even though he didn't play?
Well, I think it was just kind of, as you would expect, the game was out of hand quickly because of the aforementioned, they just didn't have the defensive firepower. And then I think it ended up 6-0 or 6-1, and it got really chippy. And there was a part where they literally did I think it was late in the third period, everyone on the ice gets a misconduct. And that included Kopitar, who I think you needed a decade before he would get 10 penalty minutes for him. So basically, what happened, I guess there was just so many people that when they were talking over the PA system, the PA announcer was announcing Eriksson Ek somehow. I guess he gets his nose into so many things that it was just normal for him to announce it, even though he wasn't at the game.
Well, that's an interesting one for sure. With that, we will be right back after a quick ad break. Welcome back, everyone. Now we're going to run you through some hot and cold streaks, as we always do. These may be important to you if you are playoff bound and contending. First one I've got for you is a Red Wing who doesn't have a point in tonight's 5-night game, so I kind of regret having him on this list already. Lucas Raymond has 7 goals and 1 assist in his last 5 games. He really put the team on his back with Larkin out. I was kind of wondering whether or not he'd fade back into the background with Larkin returning, or if he'd continue to play a prominent role. I don't know if he's on Larkin's line or not. Shems, do you have any Detroit insider information on this?
So I don't know if anything changed mid-game, but at warm-ups, it was Larkin with Raymond and Perron. So basically, as I said in the past, is that I want any winger, or at least I'm interested in any winger that's with Larkin. So the fact that he's there and on a hot streak, you don't get all of them. So if he's off this night, he has the pedigree as a player, high draft pick, has a hot streak, playing with Larkin, assuming that he sticks with Larkin, even if he does nothing today, I'd be really interested in him.
Definitely. I will say his shooting percentage is close to 50% over those 5 games where he has 7 goals. I'm not too worried about that, especially because one thing people forget is that when your shooting percentage goes down, you're also creating rebounds, and you should end up with more assists once you come off that shooting percentage bender, because if you're scoring all the time, you're not getting assists. I think Raymond's a fine hold for the rest of the season if he can fit your schedule. As teased earlier, you have a first cold streak in Alec Martinez. Is it possible for someone like Alec Martinez to have a cold streak?
Well, I think the thing is that one of the things that I used to be a fan of him earlier in the season or other seasons is that he would always get the hits in the blocks, the shots in the blocks, because he doesn't really hit that much. And then the thing would be is that because of the team offensive firepower, he would just get those stray assists, or maybe, that stray shot that he does that would just like bounce off a random player and go in. So now the issue is that he's not getting any points in the last 8 games. 6 of those were before the injury, and 2 of them were after the injury. I'm not counting tonight. And the part that really scares me is that coming back from the injury, over those 2 games, these are totals, not averages. He has 2 shots, 2 hits, and no blocks. So this might be me putting a little bit of a tinfoil hat on, but I feel like, and if you look at his stat line, is that Hannafin is basically taken over the Martinez role of doing the shots, the blocks, and getting involved in the offense, that Martinez is not having to be used as much. And you can kind of see that his ice time has gone down a little bit as well, is that keep him healthy, and then they'll probably have an idea of having that 7th defenseman or having that, crop of healthy defensemen for the playoffs. And the interesting thing is, just to put, my money where my mouth is that I have a bye week this week in the league, and I had the option between him and another defenseman on the team, and I actually took Brian Mcdonagh, because of just that. The idea is that I'm not expecting him to get any hits or any hit the score sheet, but he's going to get the hits in the blocks and the shots. So I took that much higher floor, because the way Martinez is playing, you could end up with actual zeros, or maybe like a 0.25, which is a 0 to me anyway.
Yeah, that's right. He only has 0 hits in his last 2 games combined, or 0 blocks in his last 2 games combined, and only 2 hits. I do think your Hannafin theory is pretty interesting. Like you said, his time on ice in January versus his time on ice in late February, early March, there's, a 2 to 3 minute difference in his average time on ice. So, yeah, I'm off the Alec Martinez train as a peripherals guy. Obviously, he was never much of a scorer. But we do have a defenseman who's been scoring quite a bit. Tell us about Justin Falk, who I think is finally looking right after his injury.
So usually I'm the first person to say is that defensemen will go on scoring benders and that they're going to fall off as quickly as possible. But the interesting thing with Falk that's different, he has 6 assists in his last 5 games, not accounting today, and 3 of them being power play assists. And why I'm highlighting those is that they actually changed their top power play, and he is the point man. It's kind of a weird thing to think of just all the defensemen. He's kind of more of the defenseman, but he is doing that, and he, at least the previous games, their power play has been looking good. So the idea is that this is kind of a situation where he gives you basically 2 shots and 2 hits a game and maybe throws in a block. And the fact that he's now in the power play, having that chance to get those power play assists, so really is interesting, especially in leagues. I have him in a categories league that has power play points as well. So you get those bagger stats and can even hit power play points as well. That could be a nice boon depending on your shower leagues, or maybe just giving a little bit of boost to your bottom line with your defenseman.
Another thing to note about Falk is he only has 2 goals on the season for a 1.8% shooting percentage. In the past, he's been one of those defensemen you can actually rely on to put the puck in the back of the net, similar to Zach Werenski. He had 11 goals last year and 16 the year before. Kind of hard to predict that, but there's definitely more room for growth for Justin Falk. Now on to a colder power play defenseman. Rasmus Andersson has completely fallen off the face of the earth, and it kind of coincides with the retool that Calgary has been doing through the trade deadline. Over the past 7 games, he has 0 points. He's no longer playing on Power Play 1. They have Mcdonagh, the guy they acquired from Vegas, up there. And at this point, I'd rather Uyghur, followed by Mcdonagh, followed by Rasmus Andersson. I'd be probably cutting bait on Andersson completely in a lot of leagues. Is that too extreme for you?
Yeah, I think in line with you is that they only have 3 games next week, so unless you're looking for just a couple of shots and a couple of blocks, like he's maybe a slightly better version of how I look at Martinez right now, and I'm not rushing to grab a kind of player like that.
At least Martinez has the advantage of playing 4 games next week, right? You had 2 Nashville Predators you wanted to talk about, 1 hot and 1 cold.
So the hot is Ryan McDonagh. I feel like, as I mentioned before, sometimes you have these players on a scoring bender that probably doesn't say anything, but he has 6 assists in his last 3 games. I think it was like 1 game with 1 with 2, and then 1 with 3. All on even strength, but he is on power play too. So this is just kind of a question to kind of put out there, is that, sure, this is not sustainable, but like, would you be tempted to keep him for, say, like next week, where basically you're not going to be able to fit any forwards, you're going to have to fill out your defenseman? Like, maybe could he keep it that long? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes bone dry, but like, say you're in a matchup where you're probably not favored to win. Is this a kind of a guy that just throw a Hail Mary pass and, hey, if it didn't end up being anything, it doesn't matter anyway because you're slated to lose?
I think he's one of those guys that if he's already in my lineup, I'm totally holding on to. I did it this week, actually, with Brendan Dillon in a league where I used all my moves last week. Dillon was one of my streamers, and I'm like, he's got a couple points. He hits and he blocks. Might as well leave him there. The most interesting thing to me about this Mcdonagh streak is that he's getting power play time, and he's a 34-year-old who's never really shown a power play skill set. Like, kind of wild if you ask me. I agree it's not sustainable. He actually only has 1 point in his last 4 games, so it was kind of a bender. Or no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong page. But yeah, it was a bit of a bender, and keep him if you have him, but don't go rushing out to add him, is my take. You also wanted to talk about another Ryan on the Preds, Ryan O'Reilly, who is the page I was looking at when I said 1 point in the last 4 games. He's been pretty cold lately.
Yeah, now this is kind of that strikes at my heart as Ryan O'Reilly, is that if you heard me talking the show, you know that I love my line 1, power play 1 guys, and he's there. He's playing with Forsberg at all minutes, so you would think that that would be prime for points, but he only has 1 power play goal, and that's his only point in the last 5 games, and he's not even shooting that much. He's got like 1.4 shots per game, so he has maybe like a 2-shot game that's snuck in there, and basically nothing else. So for me, this is kind of that gut check time of, as I mentioned before, maybe it was a little bit easier on defensemen because I probably could fit them in my lineup easier than forwards. Is this one of those situations where, if this was a, October, you'd be like, oh, sure, keep him, he'll get better. But would you be, keeping him, say, for example, if you had a choice between him and Arvidsson, would it just be, the positions didn't matter? Is this just a simple drop and switch those two?
I would easily be taking Arvidsson at this point. I would have easily taken Arvidsson over O'Reilly even when Arvidsson came back the first time and O'Reilly was performing a bit better. I'm kind of a bit of an O'Reilly hater, though, because he just doesn't do anything if he's not getting you points, and most of his points are assists. He does have an assist today. He's still getting all the deployment, all the ice time. I think you're fine holding him out, but yeah, if there's a guy like Arvidsson available, look to make that swap. To finish us out, I want to talk about 2 players who were traded at the trade deadline and have kind of trended in opposite directions. Tyler Toffoli, after being traded to Winnipeg, is 4 goals, 2 assists, 14 shots in 5 games. He's playing power play 1 and top 6, although only for a total of 13 or 14 minutes a night. I think the Jets are pretty good at limiting the minutes of their top 6 so that they don't get burnt out. The interesting thing I wanted to point out here, though, this is the third time in the last 5 years that Tyler Toffoli has been traded at the deadline or in the new year and become a bit of an impact player with his new team. He had 10 points in 10 games for Vancouver in 1920 before that year got completely cut short, and I think was a pretty impact player for Vancouver then. He got traded from Montreal to Calgary in 21-22. He only put up 23 points in 37 games, but obviously became a bigger player for Calgary the following season. And then going from the Devils to Winnipeg this year, he's off to a hot start, in addition to looking good in both Montreal and New Jersey. Is he just one of those players that you trust no matter where he ends up? And to completely close the loop, the reason I ask this is he's a free agent this summer. Is he someone you just don't care what team signs him and you know he's good for 60 to 65 points?
I think really the big thing is I'd have to remember where he was on the power plays. I think that's going to be the thing is that if he's put into a position next year, because I think we could all agree is Toffoli's probably rostered in all leagues, and if he isn't, easy ad, especially with the firepower that the Winnipeg has on their power play. Just grab him. That's the thing. But the way I look at it is if he has power play one time, he has the experience of shifting through teams. He's showed he has the track record of being a goal scorer. I trust him. It's just as long as I can trust his situation. That's more of the test. And if he has a clear spot on a power play 1 on a team, I'm just making it up. Let's just say somehow Detroit signed him and he's like, he takes the Perron or random guy slot and he's just like has no contenders. I'd be all over that. It's basically the not having that, hey, he switched teams downgrade. I would just be pretending as if he was always there.
Makes sense. And that's basically where I am on him too, is that unless he goes to an obviously stacked team like, I don't know, Colorado or Carolina, he might struggle to see power play 1 time. I'm just kind of like, yeah, Tyler Toffoli is going to gel with his new line mates. He's going to make a good impression on his new coaches. I think he's just a good all-around player, and guys like that don't get enough respect in this league. From that hot streak to a cold one from another traded player, Vladimir Tarasenko seems to be a bit of a fantasy loser from the trade deadline. I know you've mentioned in our host chat that you dropped or were considering dropping him. I still have him on my roster, although I currently have an illegal IR planning for Monday of semifinal week, so I'm not looking to drop anyone just yet, but he would be high on my list. With Florida in 5 games, he's down in the 14 to 15 minute range, he's on the second power play, and he's on the third line after a short look on the first line. He's only taken 9 shots in 5 games, hasn't had a point in his last 3. He's had an ugly -2 and -3 on the score sheet. Not that that's fantasy relevant, but kind of points to show that nothing's happening that's good when he's on the ice. Did you end up dropping him? Is he a cut in your eyes?
So he's kind of that fictional cut spot. He's technically still on my team, but I have 2 moves yet, and he's probably going to be the next one I move because Oshie got hurt. But as I said, I believe it was me. I forget who I was with when we did the trade deadline. I think it may have been us. Is that basically if he's top 6, I'm willing to give rope. If he's bottom 6, you better be doing something for me to be interested. So that first game looked nice, but now he's bottom 6, not doing anything. He's a free to drop, especially with the way, I could not, unless you're in a deep league or you have a lot of active slots, I'm not sure you could put him on the third line and start him over a wide variety of players that you probably have on your roster.
I feel like we've been fooled by Florida's third line multiple times in the last year or two because, it's got Lundell on it, who's a pretty highly graded prospect. The guy is usually third line and power play 2 on one of the highest scoring offenses in the league. And, you get a guy who ends up there like Evan Rodriguez was that guy for plenty of time. Anthony Duclair had some stints there back when Duclair was on Florida, and it's just like, he's never as good as you hope he's going to be.
Exactly, and especially with the schedule next week, is that all of your primetime players, your forwards, are going to be starting each week, so you're going to have to be benching someone of interesting worth. It's not just going to be that, oh, well, he fits, it's kind of like how you're talking about Dylan. I think I have like Matt Roy. You have those defensemen to just hang around because you can start them and you don't want to use a move. You're actively benching this person. Like, you have to bench, say, like someone of actual value to fit him in, and you don't want to just have a dead roster spot. So having that, brass tacks and him underperforming and on the third line is just the 3 strikes to cut him.
Totally. And as I mentioned in Matchup Maximizer, you better start looking for your second goalie and fourth defenseman now if you don't roster them normally, because next week is brutal. With that, thanks for joining us. Be sure to give us a follow at ShortShiftsKK, as well as Brian and Elon at Keeping Carlson. Please use www.gamedaytweets.com to get all the best info from Twitter without having to deal with the rest of the site. It includes team-by-team and searchable tweets by player name. Visit that site and other great sites we use to research our episode with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach, and John Reed is our digital media producer. Until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.